Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Isto. I'm Isto, and I'm proud to have you join me for Chapter 8 of Tarot Tales, a weekly gathering where I tell a little-known fairy tale based on a randomly drawn tarot card from the week prior. Those of you that were with me last week know that I drew the Four of Pentacles the week prior, which is this fantastic little card that you very may well recognize as somebody hoarding a whole bunch of money. And that's exactly what I have learned that this card represents. The idea of holding on to money, of greed, of not letting go of things, or in a non-negative sense, of accumulating wealth in some way. So I also learned that the reverse means, as always, not being able to achieve getting exactly what it is that you were hoping for. So in this specific sense, that would mean financial instability, being a spendthrift, spending too much money in any kind of different way. So greed shows up in fairy tales in a lot of different interesting ways, but I went with a very specific story that I quite enjoyed earlier this week, and that's what I've got for you here today. But before we dive into that, let us talk about our cocktails this week. First and foremost, I have frog juice. It is calling for whatever green juice is at your crunchiest organic store, which is exactly what I have. Shout out to Green Bay Organic in Astoria, New York. And for those of you that may be sober, we have a cucumber gimlet, which I think would be delicious. I'm not trying it this evening, but if anyone ever watching this in the future does try it, please let me know how it is. All righty. So, if you are joining me, if you've stuck around, I want to thank you for your patience. And if you're watching this in the future and you have a drink, thank you for joining us. To anyone watching this video, I give you a hearty cheers. Well, that's quite good. I think we'll just chug it if there's ever technical difficulties. All right, folks. So if you would like to follow along with the text today, you can look in the description below for different ways to stay in touch, but also follow along if that is of interest to you. Now, the story I have for you this week is actually from Estonia. It's a pretty interesting little tale, and it's originally called Pojakon, which stands for Northern Frog. The translation is a little different, and I've chosen to split the difference with my title. So, without further ado, let us dive into Chapter 8 of Tarot Tales. The Frog of the North. Very long ago, as old people have told me, there lived a terrible monster who came out of the north. It had the body of an ox and legs like a frog, 2 short forelegs and 2 long ones behind, a tail like a serpent 10 fathoms in length, and when it moved, it jumped like a frog. And with every spring, it covered half a mile of ground. Fortunately, its habit was to remain for several years in the same place and not to move till the whole neighborhood was eaten up. Well, all the neighboring kings had offered rich rewards to anyone that should be able to destroy this terrible beast. And before we continue, I just want to talk to you about this actual monster. So, I didn't like the translation that I was finding of a dragon because this doesn't look like a dragon to me. And also I thought that a frog was a lot more interesting. But this is actually a piece of street art from an artist called Edward von Lungus. I'm sure I don't have the Estonian pronunciation appropriately correct, but this is super cool. And I thought that this was a really beautiful rendition. He's like the Estonian Banksy, or so his Wikipedia, or so the Wikipedia says. But he's also only got like 4,000 followers. So I'm going to tag him in this. I'm going to take a little quick pause. So like, maybe that'll be the image for this evening. And, you know, Edward, if you'd like to collaborate on something, please let me know. Love your work. All right. All the neighboring kings had offered rich rewards to anyone that should be able to destroy this monster. Many had tried their luck, but all had failed miserably. However, there was a tradition amongst the wise men of the country that the frog might be overcome by one who possessed King Solomon's signet ring. That frog juice. Upon which a secret writing was engraved that would enable anyone who was wise enough to interpret it to find out how the frog could be destroyed. So we'll do our first little pause here. So a signet ring, if you don't know, is just a ring that would have a imprint in it that you would then be able to press into wax and it would leave your seal. This is not a signet ring. I don't have one, Michael. But if you get one of these, you would be able to like stamp letters and whatnot with it. Solomon is a whole nother story. So some of you may be religious. I'm not. And so I have only heard of this adjacent in, I don't know, Bible study and whatnot growing up. I'm not actually sure if this is from the Bible specifically, but Solomon as a character is super, super interesting. So Solomon's signet ring, otherwise known as the Seal of Solomon, is this, I've drawn a little magnifying glass right here indicating that it's on this man's finger, but you may know this story because there was this fable of these two women that were both laying claim to a single baby, and Solomon was like, okay, fine. Well, the one that we'll just cut the baby in half and each of you will get half of it. And then one of the women was like, oh my God, don't kill the baby. And he was like, okay, well then she gets it. Such a wise guy. And in fact, he was known for being really wise. There's a really gorgeous depiction of a dream of Solomon in which he gets wisdom. So like God comes to him in a dream and he's like, yo, Solomon, what do you want? Solomon's like, I want wisdom. And God's like, that was the right answer. So he grants him wisdom. And I've drawn that in the depiction of a lightning bolt here. But Solomon occupies this really, really interesting space between Abrahamic religious tradition and magical tradition. And there's all of these apocryphal works called like the Lesser Key of Solomon and a couple of others that talk about Solomon like having a ring that allows him to banish devils and things, demons, which is very interesting and super fun to read. Didn't dive into it for tonight's story because I thought that touching on a religious subject as a fairy tale would maybe be a little dicey. So we'll save that for at a later time. The other thing that I thought was super fun to learn about was this throne that I've drawn right here. So we've got 7 steps, and the myth is that if Solomon stepped on the first one, there would be like a little mechanical animal on each step, and then the animals would pick him up and move him up each step so that he didn't have to move at all until he was placed into a throne. And then there was a eagle that like placed a crown on his head. There were all of these golden wings and vines and whatnot that protected him from the sun. So incredibly ornate. And I love the imagery involved in it. I believe those are all of the fun. Oh, the other fun fact about this. Okay, so you'll notice that there's a star on this. And so King Solomon was the last king of Israel and allegedly built the first temple in Israel. And there's actually not a clear cut, I found, indication as to whether or not the original symbol of Solomon was this pentagram or the traditional hexagram, the Star of David, and those two actually tend to be linked and then used in a lot of magic imagery, which you would notice is actually the pentacle that we see on the cards, which I thought was so cool. All right, enough of a detour. We got a ring. The ring was King Solomon's. It's a signet ring. The signet ring is going to tell us how to destroy this frog monster. Are you with me? At last, a young man with a good heart and plenty of courage set out to search for the ring. He set off towards the rising sun because he knew that all of the wisdom of the old time came from the east. And after some years of traveling, he met with a famous Eastern magician, and he asked him for advice in the matter. The magician answered, "Mortal men have little wisdom. The birds of the air would be better guides to you if you could learn their language. And I can help you to understand it if you would only stay with me for a few days." The youth thankfully accepted the magician's offer, which was weirdly sexual in my portrayal just now, but there's no subtext, I promise. The magician's offer, who brewed a potion which made the youth able to understand the language of birds. And at the parting, the magician said to him, "If you ever get possession of Solomon's ring, come back to me, that I may explain the inscription on the ring to you." The youth agreed and continued on his travels. I love you. And he always had company as he traveled, for he understood the language of birds. But it happened one evening that he saw two very gaily plumed birds hanging out on top of a tree, talking about him. The first bird said, "I know that wandering fool under the tree there who has come so far without finding what he seeks. He is trying to find King Solomon's lost ring." The other bird answered, "He'll have to seek help from the witch maiden. If she has not got the ring herself, she will know well enough who has it." "But where are we to find the witch maiden?" said the first bird. "She has no settled dwelling. He might as well try to catch the wind." The other replied, "I do not know certainly where she is at present, but in 3 nights' time she will come to the magic spring to wash her face, as she does every month when the moon is full, in order that she may always keep the bloom of youth." "Well," said the first bird, "the spring is not far from here. Let's go and see it." Now, this was convenient. The youth resolved to follow the birds to the spring and ran after them. And after 3 long days, the birds reached a small open clearing in the forest. When the youth had overtaken them, he saw that there was a clear spring in the middle of the space. "The sun is not down yet," said the first bird. "We must wait until the moon rises and the maiden comes to the spring. Do you think she will see that young man?" "Nothing is likely to escape her eyes. Certainly not a young man," said the other bird. "Will the youth have the sense not to let himself be caught in her toils?" "We will wait," said the first bird, "and see how they get along together." They're done talking for the most part. The evening light faded, and the full moon was shining down upon the forest, when the young man heard a light rustling sound. A maiden came from without the trees. The youth had never in his life seen a woman so beautiful. Without seeming to notice him, she went to the spring, looked up at the full moon, knelt down and bathed her face 9 times. Then looked up at the moon again and walked around the well 9 times. And as she walked, she sang, "Full-face moon with light unshaded, let my beauty ne'er be faded. Never let my cheek grow pale. While the moon is waning nightly, may the maiden bloom more brightly. May her freshness never fail." Then she dried her face with her long hair and was about to leave. I am actually not clear about this, so please, women, let me know in the chats or comments if you have ever dried your face with your hair. I thought that sounded odd, and I am now quite curious. Because if not, what a fun character trait. She dried her face with her long hair and was about to leave when her eyes suddenly fell where the young man was sitting. "Oh, you ought to have a heavy punishment to have presumed to watch my secret doings in the moonlight. Tell me who you are and how you came to this place where no mortal has ever set foot before." The youth answered humbly, "Oh, forgive me, beautiful maiden. I chanced to come here after long wandering and found a good place to sleep under this tree. At your coming, I did not know what to do but stay where I was, because I thought my silent watching could not offend you." And a note to the men, don't watch anyone that's bathing alone. It's not cool. It's pretty creepy. The maiden answered kindly, "I will forgive you this time, because you are a stranger and knew no better. Come and spend the night with us. You will sleep better on a pillow than on a damp moss." The youth hesitated for a little, But presently he heard the bird saying from the top of the tree, "Go where she calls you, but take care to give no blood, or you will sell your soul." So the youth went with her, and soon they reached a beautiful garden, where stood a splendid house which glittered in the moonlight as if it was built all out of gold and silver. The youth and the witch maiden conversed pleasantly together until late at night, exploring the magnificent palace. The next morning, the maiden asked him whether he would be willing to stay with her in this beautiful place forever. "You see how I always remain young and beautiful. I am under no one's orders and can do whatever I like. So I've never thought of marrying before. But from the moment I saw you, I took a fancy to you. So, if you agree, we might be married and live together like princes, because I have great riches." Well, the youth could not but be tempted with the beautiful maiden's offer, but he remembered how the birds had called her a witch. He answered cautiously, "Do not be angry, dear maiden, if I do not decide immediately. Give me a few days to consider." "Well, take some weeks if you can need it, if you would like to consider," said the maiden. "Take counsel with your own heart." And to make time pass pleasantly, she took the youth over every part of her beautiful dwelling. So, spoiler, we are really setting this woman up to be a villain, but I do just want to recount what just happened. There's like this awesome little bit of Estonian feminism where she's like, nobody owns me, so I've never really thought about marrying, which kind of says a lot about this kind of character being plopped down into the middle of a folktale. But also, she's just like, "Hey, do you want to just hang out? I can give you anything that you want." She's not trying to capture him and is saying, take counsel with your own heart. Like, I don't want you to stay unless you actually want to stay. So just throwing that out there as we continue through the story. And one day the maiden took him to a secret chamber. Pointing to a small box, she said, "Here is my greatest treasure. It is a precious golden ring. When you marry me, I will give you this ring as a marriage gift, and it will make you the happiest of mortal men. But in order that our love may last forever, you must give me for the ring 3 drops of blood from the little finger of your left hand." When the youth heard these words, a cold shudder ran over him, for he remembered that his soul was at stake. He was cunning enough, however, to conceal his feelings and to make no direct answer. He stumbled for a moment. He asked only the maiden what was so remarkable about the ring. She answered, "Well, if I put the ring upon my little finger of my left hand, then I become a bird and can fly into the air. If I put it on the 3rd finger of my left hand, I become invisible and no one can see me. If I put the ring on the middle finger of my left hand, nothing can hurt me. If I put it on the 4finger of my left hand, I can build in a single moment, houses or anything else I desire. And finally, if I wear the ring on my fat thumb of my left hand, I become so strong that I can break down rocks and walls. Besides that, the ring has other secret signs which no one can understand. No doubt it contains great secrets of importance. The ring formerly belonged to King Solomon, the wisest of kings. It is supposed that an angel gave the ring to the king." All right, we're going to need to take another pause because it is technically an angel. I believe it's the Lesser Key of Solomon, the apocryphal work I was referencing earlier, in which the Archangel Michael gives Solomon that ring that then allows him to banish demons. But if you were like me, you were maybe just thinking, okay, well, what if she puts it on her right hand? What happens then? And I fell down a little bit of a rabbit hole into handedness and the ways that it represents itself in magic. So some of you may know that there was a long period of time where our parents were forced to write with their right hand rather than their left hand, even if they were left-handed. And I believe Latin is actually sinister, sinistra for left hand, this idea that left-handedness is evil. And that translates into magic in the same way. So there's this idea, these two beautiful hand depictions of dark magic over here on the left and then white magic over here on the right, and them being these two different ideas. So with dark magic, it's more like sex work and communism, black magic, low magic. And this higher art on the right is Abrahamic art, Abrahamic magic. So magic that might appear actually in the Bible, the banishing of demons and things like that. It's a lot more ceremonial, and it's typically associated more with selflessness. And there's actually a whole thought process, philosophy of witchcraft in general that's like, oh, there's not actually a difference in magic. So anyway, I found this all very interesting, and I believe that this is trying to indicate, to set this woman up for being particularly evil. Because what happens if she put it on her right hand? Who knows? The other thing to note is that all of this stuff falls into this category of Western esotericism, which was the first time when I was doing a whole bunch of research for this story that I started to learn about the creator of the tarot deck, Waite, not Rider, but Waite. And I don't really have a fun story about it, but I have been excited to think that there might be like a growing story through all of this stuff that kind of connects all of these items together. Anyway, she's got this magic ring. She's showing him this magic ring. He needs the magic ring to defeat this frog demon. All right. I don't think it's possible that the ring can have all the power that you say that it does. The maiden put it on the middle finger of her left hand and told the youth to take a knife and try as hard as he could to cut her with it. He tried, first only in play, and then seriously to strike her with the knife, but an invisible wall of iron seemed to be between them. The maiden stood before him, laughing and unhurt. And then she put the ring on her third finger of her left hand and vanished before his eyes. Presently, she was beside him again, laughing, "Ma!" and holding the ring between her fingers. "Do let me try," said the youth, whether I can do these wonderful things." The maiden, suspecting no treachery, gave him the magic ring and led him to a courtyard where stood a great boulder stone. "Now," she said, "put the ring upon the thumb of your left hand, and you will see how strong that hand has become." The youth did so, and found, to his astonishment, that with a single blow of his fist, the stone blew into 1,000 pieces. While they stood together, laughing at the shattered stone, the youth placed upon the ring, as if in play, upon the third finger of his left hand. "Now," said the maiden, "you are invisible to me, until you take the ring off again." But the youth had no mind to do that. He went farther off and put the ring on the little finger of his left hand, and he began to soar into the air like a bird. Well, when the maiden saw him flying away, she thought that he was playing and cried, "Come back, friend, for now you see I have told you the truth." But the young man never came back. And he did not halt in his flight until he reached the dwelling of the wise magician who had taught him the speech of birds. "Oh, I love you." The magician was delighted to find that his search had been successful, and at once set to work to interpret the secret signs engraved upon the ring. It took him 7 weeks, but he finally gave the youth the instructions for how to overcome the Frog of the North. The young man thanked the magician for his directions and quickly flew home through the air. Upon his return, the people of the kingdom told him that the frog was quite nearby, directly behind them. And the king announced publicly that he would give his daughter's hand in marriage to whosoever could free the country from the monster. Well, The youth went to the king and told him that he had good hopes of subduing the frog if the king would grant him all he desired for the purpose. The king agreed, and an iron horse on wheels, a great spear, chains, and giant iron pegs were all prepared as the youth requested, as the magician had told him. So the youth set course for the Frog of the North, riding upon his iron horse, using the spear to propel himself forward. You'll have to excuse me, I was running a little low on toner. I go through a lot of it trying to make this show, so you're just going to have to imagine this backward trajectory is going forward. The frog had its monstrous jaws wide open, ready for his expected prey. The youth, holding the iron spear upright, brought it down with all of his might in through the monster's lower jaw. And the youth, holding the iron spear upright, brought it down with all of his might. And then, quick as lightning, the youth hopped onto the ground and turned around to see that the horse had been shut in the frog's mouth. When the youth turned round, he saw the point of the spear sticking up through the roof of the frog's upper jaw. And he knew that he had jammed the other end of the spear down through the ground. So quickly, he went about trying to grab all of the chains and fastening them to the ground with the iron pegs, so that the beast was trapped to the ground. Well, the death struggle of the monster lasted 3 days and 3 nights, until the beast finally lost enough of its strength that its tail could no longer move. And when this happened, the youth took up a stone which 20 ordinary men could not have moved and beat the dragon so hard about the head that the monster lay lifeless before him. Yay! Well, you can fancy how great the rejoicing was when the news was spread abroad that the terrible monster was dead. In a few days, a magnificent wedding was celebrated between the youth and the king's daughter. But everyone forgot amid the general joy that they ought to have buried the dragon's monstrous body, for it began to have such a bad smell that no one could live in the neighborhood. And before long, the whole air was poisoned, and a pestilence broke out which destroyed many hundreds of people. So I'm going to spoil this a little. Again, we're never going to figure out where this pestilence goes. It just magically disappears. But I am suspicious that that may be the actual origin for this story, like trying to explain how this massive plague broke out. Anyway, I found that really interesting, that just kind of side fact has popped in here, especially because this story really isn't about the Frog of the North. It's about King Solomon's ring. Anyway. In distress, the king sent his son-in-law to go and seek help from the Eastern magician, to which the youth flew away almost immediately, once again turning himself into a bird. Now, the witch maiden had never rested night nor day till she found out where King Solomon's ring had gone. And as soon as she discovered that the prince was on his way to the Eastern magician in the form of a bird, she changed herself into an eagle. And she lay in wait until she saw a bird coming by with a ring tied around its neck. Go figure. She knew the bird at once and pounced upon the youth and tackled him to the ground, where they both appeared in human form, facing each other once again. "Now, villain, you are in my power," cried the witch maiden. "I favored you with my love, and you repaid me with treachery and theft. You stole my most precious jewel from me, and I will be revenged on you for your crimes." And with these words, she put the ring upon her left thumb, lifted the young man with one hand, and walked with him under her arm. She took him to a deep cave, and chained the young man's hands and feet so that he could not escape. Here you shall remain chained up until you die. And with these words, she left him. The king and the daughter waited anxiously for many weeks for the prince's return, but no news of him arrived. The king sent messengers to the east in order to find what had happened to his son-in-law. Luckily, the eastern magician came. He found where the youth was laying and said, "Oh, he is kept there by enchantment and cannot be set free without my help. I must be there to free him. I will therefore go with you myself." And so they all set out, guided by birds, and after some days came to the cave where the unfortunate prince had been chained up for nearly 7 years. Time is doing all kinds of crazy things in this story. He undid the chains with the help of magic and took care of the prince until he recovered and became strong enough to travel. Oh, no, I love you. When he reached home, he found that the old king had died that same morning. So immediately he was raised to the throne, and now after his long suffering came prosperity, which lasted to the end of his life. But he never got back the magic ring, nor has it ever again been seen by mortal eyes. Now if you had been the prince, would you not rather have stayed with the pretty witch maiden? The end. It actually ends with that question, and I find it to be an interesting one because it seems to me like he could have just turned down the witch maiden or asked the witch maiden if she could help him destroy the dragon that was eating his kingdom. But also the dragon seems to only stick around for a short period of time, so it seems like that's a solvable problem on a couple of different levels. Anyway, not enough to expound upon. I really like the idea of greed for this story because this main character kind of steals like all of his fortunes for the rest of his life, which has a very colonialistic air to it. But also, I really am fascinated by King Solomon and these meshings of these different ideas of religious texts and magic and kind of where those lines are drawn. And again, we see ourselves, if you remember, this is the Page of Pentacles, and he was Virgilius in chapter 2. Again, we have a famous figure, historical figure, that is being so lauded that all of these magical ideas are being attached to that person. And I just find it really interesting that something as simple as somebody's ring could have created all of these other stories to perhaps maybe explain away a plague. And there's something about like the hoarding of attention and like all of the wealth that Solomon had that really attracted me to this story for this card. So anyway, with that said, let us draw our card for the next week. And while I am doing that, I will say that for my gratitude this week, I was also thinking a lot about greed. We will go with this. Hey, we've got a cup. We've got an ace of cups. We've got birds. We've got a magic hand again, coming out of nowhere. I'm getting cup runneth over. I'm getting overflowing fortune, maybe sentimentality. Who knows? I know nothing about this. If you know anything about this card, please use the feedback form and story suggestion form in the description below to either give me feedback about this show or to suggest a story that you think might be interesting. Anyway, back to my gratitude. So I have a lot to be very thankful for, and one of those things that I'm fortunate for is to have, about a year ago, finally paid off all of my debt. And there are a couple of key people that I owe a huge debt of gratitude for. One would be my financial planner at the time who helped me figure things out, Garrett Prom, who would not want to be associated with this show, but thanks, Garrett. The other one would be Austin Habitat for Humanity, where I learned what credit card debt was and realized how big of a hole I was in. A fourth would be Rodney Coleman, who's the father of a very good friend who was very kind to me and offered some good advice and some suggestions for materials I could use to learn a little bit more about money. And finally, I should thank my parents who were very kind and patient with me through that long and arduous process. So, to all of you, you have, I'm sure, some idea of how freeing that has been. And I always thought to myself that when I finally paid off my debt, that I would need to do something creative. And I put a lot of things on hold until I did that. And all of this, whether you like it or not, is a direct result of your help and advice. So thank you. All right, folks. What a night. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you treat yourself with love and respect. May you continue to grow and find the strength to persevere through the painful parts of growth. May you find inspiration all around you. And may you find peace. Thank you for joining me this week. Until next week. Bye, y'all.